I never thought I'd be the woman standing at my own wedding reception, clutching a glass of champagne so hard I thought it might shatter, while my mother stood at the microphone systematically dismantling my reputation in front of everyone I love. She looked me dead in the eye, smiled that cold, rehearsed smile of hers, and told a room full of 100 people that I was only marrying my husband because I was desperate, and that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. The silence that followed was deafening, a physical weight that pressed down on my chest until I could barely breathe. But then, my husband, the man she had just insulted, stood up, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his phone. He didn't say a word to her. He just walked over to the DJ booth, plugged it in, and hit play. Within 5 minutes, 6 people, including my mother, were fleeing the venue in tears, and the secret that had been rotting my family from the inside out was finally out in the open. I need you to listen to this and tell me honestly, was I wrong for letting him burn it all down? Would you have stopped him, or would you have sat back and watched the fire just like I did? To understand why my mother decided to turn my wedding day into a public execution, you have to understand the dynamic we've had for the last 25 years. My mother, Evelyn, is a woman who thrives on control and perceived perfection. Growing up, I wasn't a daughter to her. I was a project. Every grade, every outfit, and eventually every boyfriend was scrutinized under a microscope. If I wasn't the best, I was a failure, and if I was a failure, I was an embarrassment to her. My younger sister, Maya, was the opposite. She was the golden child who could do no wrong, mostly because she learned early on how to manipulate our mother's ego to get what she wanted. By the time I met Mark, the man who is now my husband, the rift between my mother and me was already a canyon. Mark is a software engineer, steady, kind, and incredibly observant. From the moment he met Evelyn, he saw through the polished exterior. He saw the way she made passive-aggressive comments about my weight or my career, and he saw the way she doted on Maya while treating me like an afterthought. My mother hated him for it. She hated that she couldn't charm him, and she hated even more that he encouraged me to set boundaries. The planning of the wedding was a nightmare. Evelyn insisted on paying for a large portion of it, which I now realize was just a way for her to buy the right to dictate every detail. She wanted a high society affair that reflected her status, while Mark and I wanted something intimate and meaningful. Every time we disagreed, she would pull the "after everything I've done for you" card. It reached a breaking point 3 months before the wedding when I found out she had invited several of her friends whom I had never met, while telling me we didn't have room in the budget for Mark's extended family from out of state. We had a massive blowout, and Mark eventually suggested we just pay for the whole thing ourselves to get her out of the driver's seat. We did exactly that, draining our savings to ensure the day was ours. Evelyn was livid. She felt insulted and sidelined, and she spent the next 12 weeks playing the martyr to anyone who would listen. She told our relatives that I was ungrateful and that Mark was poisoning my mind against my own blood. In the weeks leading up to the big day, things got weirdly quiet. Maya, who usually loved to stir the pot, was suddenly very helpful. She was constantly at my house, helping with DIY decor and even offering to help me with my dress fittings. I thought maybe, just maybe, the family was finally coming together for my sake. Mark, however, remained skeptical. He noticed that Maya was spending a lot of time on her phone whenever she thought I wasn't looking, and he caught her several times trying to get into his home office. One night, about a week before the wedding, Mark told me he thought something was up. He's a tech-savvy guy, and he had noticed some strange login attempts on his cloud storage. He didn't want to stress me out, so he didn't give me the full details then, but he told me he was keeping an eye on things. I brushed it off as pre-wedding jitters, thinking he was just being protective. I wanted so badly to believe that my wedding would be the one day where I didn't have to be on guard. The morning of the wedding was beautiful, which only made what happened later feel more like a betrayal. I felt like a princess. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and for a few hours I actually felt loved. But as the reception began, I noticed a shift. My mother and Maya were huddled together with 4 of our aunts, the inner circle of family gossip. They were whispering and casting dark looks in my direction. When it came time for the speeches, my father gave a sweet, albeit brief, toast. Then, without being asked, my mother stood up and walked to the microphone. The room went quiet. She started off okay, talking about my childhood, but then the tone shifted. She began talking about how difficult I was as a child, how I always struggled to find my place, and how she feared I would never find someone who could tolerate my personality. People started shifting in their seats, looking uncomfortable. Then she dropped the bombshell. She claimed that she had proof that I was only marrying Mark because I had got myself into massive debt and needed his high salary to bail me out. She even went as far as to imply that I had been unfaithful during our engagement and that the only reason the wedding was happening was that I had manipulated him. The room was deathly silent. I felt the blood drain from my face, and I looked at Mark, expecting to see him crushed. Instead, he looked calm, terrifyingly calm. He stood up, adjusted his suit jacket, and walked toward the stage. My mother looked smug, probably expecting him to break down or demand an apology. Instead, he took the mic from her hand and said, "Evelyn, I knew you'd try something today. I just didn't think you'd be bold enough to do it in public." He looked at the audience and said, "Before we continue with the revelations, I think everyone should see what I found on my home security cameras and my cloud backups this past month. It seems some family members were very busy trying to sabotage this day." He pulled out his phone, connected it to the audio-visual system we had set up for the slideshow, and the large screen behind the head table flickered to life. "Now I want you to really think about this. I was standing there in my white dress, watching my husband prepare to drop a nuclear bomb on my entire family. My mother was standing right next to him, still looking confused. At that moment, I could have stopped him. I could have told him to put the phone away and just leave. But after years of being the family punching bag, after having my wedding day ruined by lies, I stayed silent. Before I tell you what was on that phone and who ended up crying, I want you to pause and tell me in the comments. Would you have stopped him? Would you have protected the sanctity of the wedding, or would you have let the truth come out, no matter how ugly it was? I need to know if I'm the villain here for wanting them to hurt as much as they hurt me." Mark hit the play button. The first thing that popped up wasn't a photo, but a screen recording of a group chat. The participants were my mother, Maya, and those 4 aunts who had been whispering all night. The chat was titled, "The Intervention." As Mark scrolled through, the entire room could see the messages. They had been planning for months to humiliate me. They joked about my dress, they mocked Mark's career, and most shockingly, they talked about how they were going to leak fake bank statements to Mark to make him think I was a gold digger. But it got worse. A video started playing, footage from our living room camera that Mark had hidden after he suspected Maya was snooping. The video showed Maya and my mother in our house while we were out at work. They were going through our desk, looking for financial documents. In the video, you can clearly hear my mother saying, "Once we ruin this for her, she'll have no choice but to come crawling back to us. I won't have her thinking she can live a life I didn't approve of." The most devastating part was a voice memo Mark played next. It was a recording of a phone call between my mother and my best friend, Sarah, who was also a bridesmaid. In the recording, my mother was offering to pay off Sarah's credit card debt if Sarah would agree to tell Mark that she had seen me out with another man. The room was in a state of absolute shock. I looked over at Sarah, who was turning a ghostly shade of white, and then at my mother, whose smug expression had completely vanished. The 4 aunts were looking at the floor, realizing that their private malice was now public record. Mark looked at the crowd and said, "I married this woman because she is the strongest person I know for surviving a family like this. And as of right now, the 6 people involved in this chat are no longer welcome in our lives or this building." The fallout was instantaneous. One of the aunts burst into tears and tried to run out, tripping over her own dress. Maya started screaming at Mark, calling him a freak for spying on them, but the guests were already turning on her. People were shouting, "Disgraceful!" and "How could you?" My mother stood frozen for a second before she realized the gravity of what had happened. She had built her entire identity on being the perfect mother and the pillar of the community, and in 5 minutes, Mark had stripped that away forever. She tried to approach me, her eyes welling up with fake tears, saying, "Sweetie, you have to understand it was for your own good." But I just stepped back and pointed toward the door. I didn't say a single word. I didn't need to. Seeing her realize she had lost all power over me was more satisfying than any insult I could have hurled. The 6 of them, my mother, Maya, the 4 aunts, were essentially chased out by the sheer weight of the guests' judgment. They left the venue in tears, sobbing not out of remorse but out of the shame of being caught. Once they were gone, the atmosphere in the room changed completely. It went from a tense, awkward disaster to a genuine celebration of survival. Mark came over to me, took my hands, and asked if I was okay. For the first time in my life, I felt truly safe. We didn't let it ruin the rest of the night. We danced, we ate, and we toasted to a future where we didn't have to look over our shoulders. My best friend, Sarah, tried to apologize, but I told her to leave her bridesmaid bouquet on the table and never call me again. I lost a mother and a sister that day, but I gained a level of freedom I never thought was possible. In the months since the wedding, the family has been in shambles. My mother tried to spin the story to our extended relatives, but Mark had already sent the video and the chat logs to the entire family email list. She's been effectively blacklisted from family events, and Maya has moved to another state because she couldn't handle the local reputation she earned. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness, not for the people I lost, but for the family I wish I had. But then I look at Mark, and I remember that he loved me enough to fight for the truth, even when the truth was ugly. People tell me that weddings are supposed to be about family, but I think weddings are about starting a new one. I chose my husband, and he chose to protect me from the people who were supposed to love me most. If there's anything I've learned from this whole mess, it's that blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty and respect do. If you have people in your life who use your love as a weapon against you, don't be afraid to cut the cord, even if it's in the most dramatic way possible. Sometimes, the only way to heal is to let the truth burn down everything that was built on a lie. Please, if you think I did the right thing by letting Mark play that phone, like this video, it helps me feel a little less alone in this. And if you've ever had to deal with a toxic family member who tried to ruin your big moment, share your story in the comments. I read them all, and it helps more than you know. Subscribe for more stories where the truth finally comes out, and I'll see you all in the next story.